Everybody, I don't think anybody likes the new theme.
I like it. I liked the old one too.
You know,
Get it? You just want the song back.
it's kind of my main motivation. It's too good.
Yeah.
But the version that I make that's my own isn't going to be so, like, jock jams. It's going to be more precious and twee. I'm going to have Zooey Deschanel sing it. Guys, I was watching New Girl last night, and Zooey Deschanel, I don't get it anymore.
Is the show still on the air?
You've officially grown up.
I think I have.
Yeah.
That's a college-era crush.
Yeah.
And Lizzie Kaplan had a short arc on that show she was on, and I'm like, ooh, Lizzie Kaplan.
Yeah.
I think I'm man enough for your non-childlike appearance.
I was gonna say, like, where is this going?
Well, Zooey Deschanel.
I prefer Meryl Streep. I love the intelligence in her eyes.
I prefer Dame Judi Dench.
So you guys are joking, and you can both burn in hell because Meryl Streep is fucking the sexiest lady in the world.
Is Dame Judi Dench?
I have to say, it's not recording, right? Or at least this isn't going on the pod.
This is all material,
Okay,
baby.
fine. Modern day Kirsten Dunst is the most attractive. She's like kind of plumped up. A bit.
Shit, are we recording that?
No, and like seeing her with Jesse Plemons, they're like two like a doughy couple.
Oh no, now it's definitely not
they're
going.
adorable.
No, Jesse Plemons is super in shape. He just has a baby face.
Not based on pictures I've seen.
He's like an in shape guy with a baby face.
He's got you. Well, you haven't watched Fargo, the TV show.
I watched the first season.
The first season's not great. The second season's amazing. The third season, I don't know. That ended right when Twin Peaks: The Return came on, and I was like, "Oh, fuck you,
fuck Fargo."
Yeah,
yeah. We talked about this. I watched the first season and hated it, and immediately afterwards, I read an interview.
Is this pod banter?
Yeah, leave it.
Do you want to take another crack at she plumped up? Like a fucking Hebrew national fucking hot dog?
No, she filled out.
That's even worse somehow.
Didn't she? She had a child, right?
Yeah, she matured.
She had a child with Jesse Plemons.
Yeah, I find her to be a very beautiful and charming lady.
Put it in a way that doesn't involve her body changing mass or volume.
I don't know. I find her way more attractive now than I've ever found her.
There you go.
Okay, there you go.
Because she's thick, man.
Oh, God.
What?
Frank, say it. Let's turn it into a weekly thing.
Wait, what? Oh, so I actually want to use that on the pod, but Justin wants to skeet in Kirsten Dunst.
Jesus Christ.
So I actually want to use that on the pod for when we start. But I want to. It's for a different purpose.
Jesus.
Do
you just want to have this not be on the pod?
No. I say first segment done.
No.
I think that's
we have
golden.
no stuff to talk about.
Okay. Well, it's still staying in. How's it going, guys?
Wait, we didn't say our names.
Justin, Tom, Frank. We all know it. Plaid lads.
There we go.
Theme music.
So I would actually like to open the pod by issuing an apology.
To whom?
Justin?
To the Plaid Lads Nation.
Uh-huh.
I would like to apologize for the last episode wherein I was fucking wilding out. And at some point I decided to say that Justin wanted to skeet in Joanna Newsom.
that was a moment.
What I should have said was that Justin wanted to skeet on Joanna Newsom.
Jesus Christ, Frank!
What is this? This is not you.
No, it is him. Let the world know.
What happened to my little baby boy?
Little baby boy's all grown up.
Talking about skeet.
So is Justin, apparently.
Oh, God. What?
You off pod said that you want to get a headboard so that you stop sliding off your bed when you jerk off.
I was riffing, bro. Also, I need to stop wetting down my sheets before I get in.
Aren't you guys glad that we're not having these are conversations for context that we used to have in public
loudly?
Yeah, now we just fucking record them and broadcast them to the public at large, time immemorial.
But we used to have these conversations in front of angry, bitter senior citizens.
Yeah.
I kind of wish it was that way.
Do you want to?
Because now they're going to die soon.
Invite our parents in to watch us record live.
J baby, how you doing? Are you back on the cigs?
Yeah, I've been smoking. I haven't quit yet. It's hard, guys.
Is that why you're so verklempt?
Yes. Well, no, because my lungs are filled with smoke, so I'm pretty pacified. I got about a half hour into quitting when I realized my life was a gaping black hole that I filled with cigarettes. And then I was like, whoa, I'll deal with this later.
We're putting that problem off for another day.
Yes. And I've been having a grand old time since.
Did you ever smoke, Frank?
Oh yeah, I smoked while I worked with you guys.
Mm-hmm. That's right. I remember that now. Why did you start again? Because you started working at our branch.
Yes.
You were working at a different store, and you got moved to our store, and you were like, "Oh, I'm smoking again."
Yeah.
What did you smoke?
I started smoking when I was in college, and then I stopped for a long time, and then I started working for the store that we used to work for, and the depression and anxiety set in almost immediately. And I chose the Sad Man's Easy Medicine, which were good old Marlboro Reds.
How can anybody smoke those, man?
I can and did. Which is, Justin has smoked more for longer than I have and did, but the amount of Marlboro Reds that I have smoked in my life mean that my lifespan is significantly shorter.
Yeah, they I think an ingredient in Marlboro Reds is a cartoon box with a skull and crossbones.
It definitely is.
Well, that's what they look
and
like.
Then I stopped a year into working there or whatever it was.
I smoked as well. Smoked all through college, and I actually got Justin smoking.
That's true.
So
awful person.
Well, that's the thing. He's gonna die from it, and I'm just gonna go on the record. I'm just gonna confess to the murder now.
It's you're Salieri.
Well, I was 18, and Jersey had just passed that law making it so you can't buy cigarettes till you're 19.
Yes,
it's 21 now. And we had a friend who worked at a drugstore, and I had decided that I wanted to try smoking because I just started at community college, and that's what you do. Mm-hmm. So I got our friend who worked at the Rite Aid to hook us up, and took my ID. He was like, "Oh yes, sir.
Yeah,
you may have as many cigarettes as you like."
It's not even for alcohol. It's cigarettes.
I think I bought a garbage bag of pipe tobacco too. Yeah. So I had my cigarettes, and Justin was with me, and I went out to my car, and I lit a cigarette, and he looked at me with that mixture of repulsion and curiosity.
Yeah.
And he was just like, "Hey, can I have a drag off that?" Can I try that?
Can I have a cigarette? Because I'm baby Justin, and this cigarette's going to make me a man.
Yeah.
Pretty much. And he took my cigarette, and he took a single drag, and he started coughing, and he went, "Ew, ew, icky," were his exact words.
He instantly grew a beard.
He said, "Ew, ew, icky," and then he said, "Take this. This is disgusting," and I took my cigarette back. And since that day, Justin has not gone outside of a quitting attempt. Justin has not gone like an entire day without smoking.
Yeah.
And it's going to kill him, and it's my fault.
It's 100% your fault.
For
I'm going to blame
reference,
Frank, too, for no reason.
For reference, when we worked at the store that we worked for, when Justin would go on his lunch breaks, instead of eating, I assume you just smoked cigarettes the whole time?
Yeah.
Because I never saw you eating anything or going to get food or doing anything remotely involving putting nutrition into your body.
No, all I need is some cigarettes. Maybe I'll get a cup of coffee. And
anyway.
If anybody's out there listening on the fence about smoking, do it.
It's fun and cool.
It's great.
You're so grown up.
You need to spend your money on something.
Go off camp.
And you're continuing a long, proud tradition of people being exploited
to
by
give
big
you
evil
the things
corporations.
to make you feel good.
So look at it this way, guys. I mean, it's only when you're young. You're only young once, and then you can quit later. Maybe. If you don't become super addicted.
Yeah.
So, like, Frank was able to quit.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to quit. Mm-hmm. Justin wasn't. So that's like a 66% chance that you'll die from smoking. So just like, roll the dice. You'll like, you know what? You're going to live forever. You're 20. Like, you'll be in the percent that doesn't get addicted. You're fine.
Roll them dice, baby.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of rolling the dice, can we talk about the news?
Da, 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 the news.
Thank you for that, Justin.
Thanks, Justin.
Thank you, Fat Justin.
Thank you, Fat Justin.
Oh no, can't do that voice anymore.
So, what a weird, wild, wacky world. So this week in the news,
we might all die.
Well, okay.
Okay, I don't know anything about this, so you guys have to explain this to me.
Okay, so last week or couple
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago now.
Valentine's.
There was an attack. So everybody knows Pakistan and India are not simpatico on a little place called Kashmir, the sweater country. And this is in the Himalayan.
A place where there's literally nothing.
It's basically just a bunch of mountains.
It's mountains. It's empty mountain ranges.
All right. I'll make a controversial statement. And if I'm wrong and you're from Pakistan or India, send me a letter. At me, man. Let's talk about it. But I feel like this is pretty accurate. So basically, Pakistanis and Indians, there are many kinds of Indians with many different languages and ethnicities, but by and large, the kinds of Indians and the kinds of Pakistanis that live along the border between the two countries are the same people group ethnically and linguistically. It's just one group is predominantly Hindu and the other group is predominantly Muslim. And it's a great source of friction. And when India gained independence, they partitioned the Muslim majority part of that area into Pakistan, which originally included Bangladesh, but eventually Bangladesh became its own thing. And they don't like each other a lot. And even though they share so many ethnic linguistic things, they pretend like their languages are different languages when they're really not. It's a language called Hindustani, but they pretend that it's Urdu and Hindi.
And they share, let it be said, centuries of history with one another before this.
Yeah, but just like so many other things, when two people groups are so similar, that can be, they hate each other that much more. So they fight over Kashmir, the Himalayan region of southern Pakistan or northern India, however you want to look at it. And so they're both nuclear states. They both have developed the bomb, and
they both have so we should say in terms of their nuclear armaments, they both have a very small amount of nukes, and they are low yield Hiroshima-sized bombs.
Yeah.
However,
so their agreements on how to use them are what's problematic. So not too long ago, there was a non-state actor terrorist attack on a group of Indian military in which a bus was bombed and 40 Indian soldiers were killed. It was a non-state attack, but the Indian government's policy on nuclear weapons is they have a non-first strike agreement, meaning they will never launch an attack first. But they also have a policy wherein they reserve the right to invade with their army a country that is the source of terrorist attacks. So the Pakistanis basically have reserved the right to tactically use their nuclear arms against any invading army. So basically, the Indians will invade even though it's non-state, and the Pakistanis are willing to use their nuclear weapons first if they're invaded, which would then authorize, under Indian law, the Indians to use their nuclear arms in retaliation. So what's happened is it's been about 2 weeks since a Pakistani non-state actor blew up a bus. And by the way, when I say non-state actor, there's a gargantuan asterisk next to that. We don't
a huge blinking light.
So it's basically just parentheses. Shrug. It was probably a state actor.
So the thing about Pakistan is that
Michael Showalter.
What? Pause.
A state actor. The state?
Yes. An actor from the state.
So Michael Ian Black or...
Wait, did you say...
Go on.
What did you say before you choked? Did you say Joe Latrulio?
You said Michael Showalter.
Just go on.
Okay. Anyway, so the thing about Pakistan is that it is a parliamentary system, but it's like a quote-unquote parliamentary system with a prime minister. The current prime minister is a dude named Imran Khan, who is a former super famous cricket player. But the thing about Pakistan is that it's basically just controlled by the military deep state. Mm-hmm. And the military is extraordinarily popular in Pakistan and in India. The Indians take great pride in their military. So if the Pakistani military, like Tom said, just wants to start popping off, they really don't have to answer to the government. They kind of can just do it.
Pakistanis. So where this gets really bad is that in the past week now, including earlier today, the Indians, in response to the terrorist attack, sent a sortie of aircraft into Pakistani space to blow up terrorist camps, to which the Pakistanis responded having their airspace violated by shooting down 2 of the planes, which is just escalating things. Apparently they've captured one of the pilots. There is video of that. They are treating him remarkably well under the circumstances. He was attacked by civilians as soon as he ejected safely, and the Pakistani military on video intervened from him he was getting the ever-loving shit beaten out of him by Pakistani civilians, and the military actually intervened and shielded him from the civilians. And there is now a video that they released of him cooperating pretty amicably with Pakistani military interrogators, where they are giving him cups of tea, and he is very polite and amiable and not releasing any sort of outward spider sense stress signs that you normally would in situations where someone is being coerced, either in military or a police type interrogation. So it seems like Pakistan, who is a signatory of the Geneva Convention, is sort of upholding that stuff right now, but they do have to return him within a week if they don't want to violate that particular piece of international law. So now, and Frank, I think you can answer this a bit more intelligently. So one thing to keep in mind when we're talking about India and Pakistan is, I think Frank mentioned this when he mentioned sort of the size and scope of their nuclear arms. These are not, although when you look at India, you wonder why they're not, given their population and economy. These are not superpower militaries, meaning that the planes involved are like 70s era, a few generations back, kind of old style, Soviet era planes, and like Mirages or something along those lines. And like the nuclear arms are much smaller. Their standing armies are much smaller. The reason Pakistan reserves the right to use their nuclear arms in case they're invaded is because their military is a little wanting.
The Pakistani military, especially in comparison to the Indian military, is small and shitty and poor.
And keep in mind, like, Pakistan is not a small country. It's in this group of countries that we don't think about often enough because they're enormous, but not quite like USA, China enormous, or India enormous for that matter, which is like Pakistan's around 100 million people, I think, or 90 million, something on the order, versus 1.3 or 4 billion people. With a B. But even with that many people, India's military, they don't have like stealth hypersonic jets and enough nuclear arms to eradicate life on Earth. But still, now Frank, you can answer this. So a war could be very costly in terms of human lives and environmental degradation. But Frank, you could probably answer this. What are the implications for the various allegiances sort of causing this to expand?
So for right now, everybody's kind of pulling back. The United States is elsewhere occupied. They are currently, our special little boy is in Vietnam, currently trying to iron out denuclearization talks with North Korea. I'm sure that'll go swimmingly. And China, who is Pakistan's big old friend, has basically stayed out of it, except for a state spokesperson of China just basically telling everybody to chill a little bit. So India's two big backers are Russia and us, USA. And we have taken a hard line against Pakistan since the Trump administration began, because Trump blames Pakistan for a lot of terrorism, which is probably true. Sorry, like, he's right about some things. It doesn't mean he knew that. It means somebody told him that. So for right now, the global order is basically staying out of it, which is weird because the last two times India and Pakistan really started to go at it, it took the global order telling them to calm down for things to not happen, like things to really not start popping off.
And let's keep in mind they've had quote unquote wars before, and I think they've had wars before while they were both nuclear states. And obviously no arms were used. So we've sort of been here. I don't think either side really wants anything. This is I don't think, besides Kashmir, which, as Frank said, is basically just empty mountains where sweaters come from. It's not really that useful. It's really more, it's a pissing contest. They don't really have territorial ambitions in each other's countries. It's like the last scene in Pulp Fiction. It's Honey Bunny and Sam Jackson with guns at each other.
In lighter news, a friend of the pod, director of Charade, Stanley Donen, has died. We in Pladganistan.
Oh Christ!
Salute you, sir. And then I wanted to bring up the death of comedian Brody Stevens. He was a hilarious, super positive comedian who was very open about his struggles with depression. I grew to know him through his many podcast appearances and then his stand-up. And he committed suicide on, I believe, February 22nd. And has it been happening more lately of celebrity suicides? Every time it happens, it's like another hit to the armor of that things can work out. You know what I mean?
Justin.
Yeah.
Do we need to get you like an espresso or something? Is there any way we can turn this mood around?
Jesus. All I'm saying is, with mental illness, and especially with something like suicide, it's a very certain kind of mood and spot that you're in. And it's always hard to tell. And whenever these things happen, you hear people on social media saying, you know, if you're struggling with something like this, here's a phone number to call, and saying to people who are the loved ones that these are like the warning signs and everything. And what I want to say is to the people who are actually affected by it, that when you're in that deep spot, that passes. That's driving on a bumpy road that will pass. All of the underlying things will not pass without work, without help, but it's just the wrong things all meeting up into one terrible thing that lead to things like this.
I saw an article, and I'm sorry, I don't have the source, but it basically said that suicide interventions, the way to view them is as a crisis response. And what they did is they tracked the 5-year survival rate of suicidal people in these crisis interventions, and they found that the 5-year survival rate was something like 95%, meaning that even, notwithstanding any major depression or addiction or anything else that was happening, once the episodes of suicidality were over, there was no sort of persistent chronic threat of death. That so like you're saying, like it's, when you're at that hyper depth, treat it like it's a crisis.
Yeah,
and it'll pass.
And it's hard. It's very hard to say that to the
people who are in it
through it. But it's just a momentary glimpse of hell. That as long as you can move, it's hard.
So I got my trumpet out. I was going to play taps, but then this got too somber and serious.
Well, no, I mean, here's the thing. Taps is you know what? I'm glad that you bring it up, because we can acknowledge that it could have been an ironic thing, but I want to say, yes, do it unironically.
All right. Oh, man, I really hope I do a good job.
Let's go for it.
Let's go for it. Oh, jeez. It's not... All right, hold on.
Is it not in tune?
I gotta find it.
Oh, fuck. Rest in peace.
I'm a high school lover, and you're my favorite flavor.
So this week on the pod, we did the 1999 drama film directed by Sofia Coppola in her debut as a film director.
Is that right?
It's The Virgin Suicides, adapted from the debut novel by Jeffrey Eugenides from 1993. So the plot of the movie is as follows. In the suburbs of Grosse Pointe, Michigan, a group of neighborhood boys, now grown men, reflect upon their memories of the 5 Lisbon sisters, ages 13 to 17, in the late 1970s. Unattainable due to their Catholic faith and overprotective parents, math teacher Ronald and his homemaker wife, the girls Therese, Mary, Bonnie, Lux, and Cecilia are an enigma that fill the boys' conversations and dreams. Narrated by Giovanni Ribisi, by the way. I don't think we find out which kid he is.
I always assumed he was the tall kid.
Yeah, I figured so too.
I thought he was the little guy.
I can see that too.
During the summer, the youngest sister, Cecilia, slits her wrist in a bathtub but survives. Her therapist is played by Danny DeVito, which is hilarious.
Yeah, he is.
After her parents allow her sisters to throw a chaperone basement party intended to make her feel better, she excuses herself and jumps out of her second-story bedroom window, dying when she is impaled on the iron fence below. Pretty great. In the wake of her act, the Lisbon parents watch over their 4 remaining daughters even more closely. This further isolates the family from the community and heightens the air of mystery surrounding the girls, to the neighborhood boys in particular.
So, this movie had I kind of had a little trouble making sense of its tone. Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize, I was confused by the credits when it said it was written, directed by Sofia Coppola, but it totally felt like an adaptation of a piece of literature, yes. A novel or a short story. So tone-wise, the first act had kind of a liveliness, a lightness.
A lot of comedy.
And it was a little, to me, reminiscent of...
Edward Scissorhands?
Yeah, it had
100%.
It had a bit of a Tim Burton-esque sort of floating point hypothetical Americana.
Also very much Blue Velvet. The beginning, the lighter...
Yeah, for sure. And the way it was treating the serious topic of suicide and her eventual actual death, like, I kind of... I assumed that she was dead initially when I was watching it, and then she survived. And I was just like, oh, are these going to be actual suicides? And then, like, when she died, I thought about the movie's title, that, like, oh, she's a virgin, so, like, only the sisters who are virgins by the end will kill themselves. And it's just like, so I was kind of surprised that the movie had it in it to kill them all. So I was kind of like, is it more funny? Is it more light? Is it more sort of camp, like Tim Burton? Or is it more sort of like profound stuff?
Well, I mean, that's the question of the tone. I don't want to get to it fully yet. I'll get to it a little later of my thoughts on the... But... I can totally see where you're coming from, and the I've seen this many times.
First time, by the way.
This time hit me the most of what I believe the tone of the movie is, but it depends on who you think the point of view characters are. Is it the girls? No, it's not. We are kept at a distance from them purposefully, because it's all about the mystery of their suicides. Is it about the boys? No, it is not, because we don't know anything about them except that they're obsessed with these girls. Is it about Trip Fontaine? No, he comes in the middle. He's out in the middle. Is it the parents? No. Is it the
community?
The community? No. We don't get to know any of these people in any real depth. Not that it's not the movie's fault. It's not a failing of the movie. These are real characters, but we're shown just surfaces, because that's what the movie is all about. Surfaces of people and the distance you are from them. and I'll get into it a little later, but that's what I find so brilliant about this movie.
So I think that this weird tonal juggle, it's what it inherits from the book, because that's something that happens a little bit more easily in novels. Mm-hmm. And I think that sort of inheritance is maybe one of its more significant flaws, because I think it's a little bit too, and I've actually not read the book, but you know how you can kind of tell a thing lifts a lot from a book based on the narration?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This felt very literary to me, and I'm open to being wrong. If I read the book and the book is completely different, that's fine. Then it's just things that I don't like about the way Sofia Coppola wrote the screenplay, and not things I don't like about the book. But for the first, and I've seen this like 3 times now. Mm-hmm. This was the first time that when the little girl says in the beginning to her doctor in the hospital, you know, what could possibly be wrong with you? And she goes,
"Obviously, doctor, you've never been a 13-year-old girl."
Yeah, I get it, Sofia Coppola / Jeffrey Eugenides. Being a teenager sucks, and it's hard. But, like, thank you. Thank you for spelling.
Not to jump, I just want to bring this up. I agree with you. I had the same reaction when seeing that line. Not to jump ahead to the end, but they kind of bookend the movie, which is you have the young girl saying that, and our reaction is kind of like, okay, we get it. At the end of the movie, during a debutante ball, you have an adult back into a pool.
I've had in my cruel world. No. You don't understand me. I'm a teenager. I got problems.
Yeah, making such light of these poor young girls. You know, what did they have to fucking worry about after they have all committed suicide?
Yeah. Let's take that apart because it doesn't come up in the synopsis there. But she slits her wrist, and they decide to have the party. But the thing that sends her out is that local boys are invited in, and they're all talking and hanging out, and the sisters are very gregarious and hanging out. But the youngest one is kind of keeping to herself, and they bring in another kid, and the kid has Down syndrome.
Yeah.
And they're being very friendly at him, but it's kind of they're using him as a piece of amusement,
and they're showing off to the girls. Before that, the boys are all very shy and awkward,
but they find strength in exploiting this
making this kid a mascot, basically.
And it was a great fucking moment, because like one kid tries to make fun of him by saying, "Oh, flip a coin with him. You know, he always picks heads," and he thinks that's he's an idiot. He's an adult. He's always going to pick heads. But if you watch it, it never comes up tails. Mm. And I love that little moment where it's just like, fuck your assumption of how, no, it never fucking comes up tails. You're putting this kid down, and that's the thing that the girl, the youngest one, I want to say Celeste? No, Cecile, is so disgusted by this that she asks to be excused from the party, goes up to the roof and jumps off. And that moment, the whole thing, and that moment in particular, speaking of literary tendencies, create a bridge in my mind to that other soothsayer of adolescent angst and preteen awfulness, J.D. Salinger. That moment of being in this clairvoyant youth where you can suss out the world for what it is before your head gets too filled up with sort of the minutia nonsense of adulthood and the goings-ons of life. And she just called the world for as it kind of was when Frank talks about that moment with the debutante ball at the end. sort of cold and kind of awful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she just says, no thanks.
Now that's one thing that I had the thought while watching it this time was I found it interesting that the youngest child
Yes,
was the first one to commit suicide, and she was the one who was very what's the word precocious. You later on, you see the kids, the boys reading her diary, and just skipping over the pages and pages of classic poetry, and I thought that's interesting and weird because we don't really see that precociousness from any of the other sisters throughout the film, and I thought that's an interesting choice, and I didn't fully get it, and then I did. Which is there's this youngest child. I think me and Tom are youngest. Mm-hmm. She's observing. She is the one with the clearest view of what the world is for this family, for her sisters, for her in this world. And she's the one who understands, this isn't great. You know?
That said, the moment the scene of the boys reading the diary, which is really creepy that they wound up with the diary anyway.
Oh,
super creepy.
Yeah, so much of this, which we'll get to at the end, is the boys don't get it. And
they kind of acknowledge that. They know that. And there's kind of, again, how the film was a bit literary. There's a few soliloquies that kind of go on with the overdubbing of the boy voice. And talking about the boy's experience of reading the diary and sort of getting into the headspace of a girl and being sort of beguiled by the mystery of not being able to understand them and sort of the magical way in which they live. And he summed it up by saying, like, in knowing which colors go together. And
yeah, I appreciated the comedy. I think the comedy worked. Anyway,
that wasn't a comic moment for me. That was kind of a beautiful moment.
I have one more comment about this portion of the movie. I also think that what doesn't work in this portion is there are a couple of sequences wherein characters hallucinate the youngest girl.
Yes.
I'll agree with that. I think you can just chalk that up to Sofia Coppola being a first-time filmmaker. The way that it's filmed, there's no starkness to it. There's no suddenness or strangeness to it. She's just kind of there, and there's no visual signifier in the way that it's directed that it's supposed to be hallucinatory or strange. She's just kind of hanging out.
I was okay with that.
I was okay with it. I think...
Frank.
I kind of think that works towards the purpose of the film, though, which I'll get to at the end.
There's a sleepy dreaminess to adolescence that, tone-wise, this film did a very good... I kind of... Maybe I'll save this for like a sort of a final remarks thing, but I'm very glad I watched this movie for the first time so far from my own adolescence, that I fully watched it from outside my adolescence, because it was...
I think it's very important. I haven't read the book. I think I'm going to, because that was written by a man. It's very important that this... I think that this film was directed by a woman. That I'll get to it now. Okay. The point of view of the film is not the boys, is not the sisters, it is not the community, it is Sofia Coppola. The movie itself, the narrator is talking about the mystery of these girls and how we were the ones who loved them. But the film itself is not saying that. It's that added layer of dramatic irony that it's not even... I think it is so very specifically Sofia Coppola, the dramatic irony. It's not the dramatic irony that we as the audience obviously see, that these boys are wrong and we're not meant to take them fully seriously. I think it's a far more subtle film than that. I think it is the point of view of Sofia Coppola making this film about the boys. I'll get to examples as we go on, where she kind of breaks the fourth wall of the film, because the film is not a frame narrative, but it's narrated by the boys grown up. It's very Wonder Years. It's very A Christmas Story. It's all of those, but with subtle differences that really, at least to me, shakes you out of that. It's also very like Stand By Me or something like that, or The Goonies. Anyway, let's get on to the next segment.
Yes. At the beginning of the new school year in the fall, Lux forms a secret and short-lived romance with Trip Fontaine, the school heartthrob. Trip comes over one night to the Lisbon residence in hopes of getting closer to Lux and watches television with the family. Trip persuades Mr. Lisbon to allow him to take Lux to the homecoming dance by promising to provide dates for the other sisters. After winning the king and queen, Trip persuades Lux to ditch the group and have sex on the football field. Afterwards, Lux falls asleep and Trip abandons her. At dawn, Lux wakes up alone and has to take a cab of a taxi variety home. What do we think, guys?
This is a sad sequence.
It's a good portion of the movie too.
Yeah.
It is.
It's a really short synopsis. Like the build-up is really long. Trip's the hottest boy in school. All the girls want him. Even some of the adults want him. It's a little creepy.
It's a little creepy, but
it's hilarious.
It's hilarious.
It's pretty good, and Josh Hartnett is great.
Yes.
Perfect. And then he disappeared
Josh
forever.
Hartnett's goddamn delightful.
Yeah.
He is. He's. We'll get to it. Anyway. No, we won't. So he's super attractive. All the girls want him, but he doesn't want any of them. He wants Lux. He wants what he can't have.
He has them.
Much like Justin Tortora, he wants Kirsten Dunst.
Jesus Christ. 36-year-old.
36-year-old Kirsten Dunst. Not in this movie, Kirsten Dunst.
Jesus. No, but he gets around. He's
a cat. He's a
Exactly.
So he's a magic man, as the Heart song says in the soundtrack.
A little on the nose, the Heart in this movie. There are two Heart songs that they do.
Yeah, but when talking about like tone and stuff, when the movie, I think this is a great film. I'm just gonna say that now. When it goes on the nose, it needs to go on the nose. You know what I mean? Anyway.
I agree with that. So he wants the girl he can't have because she's the only one he can't get a reading on. And he, pursues her. And there's a scene where they're in an assembly watching a film and he comes in and he flirts with her and he asks her out. And she, I suppose, acquiesces. And I loved watching this scene, this long shot of Kirsten Dunst, because she had this oh-so-coy kind of smile that was throughout everything, all of her interactions, but especially her interactions with boys, because she was an adolescent and she was a bit, enthralled with all of that. And she had another crush earlier and would write in felt pen onto her underwear the name of the object of her crush. So she's sitting there and she's facing forward at the presentation as Josh Hartnett makes and Trip Fontaine makes his moves, and she smiles that coy smile and agrees to go out with him. But immediately after sort of the wave of joy wears off her face in the flirtatious conversation, there's this like emptiness that comes over her. And I think it's a wonderful subtlety of Kirsten Dunst's performance.
Yeah. Speaking of subtlety, I think this is a good moment to talk about the performances in the film. It's a goddamn shame that he's a right-wing crazy man.
James Woods?
But
James Woods, he's amazing.
Is amazing in this. Kathleen Turner is amazing in this. Even though very much at the beginning, the youngest daughter was heavily involved. She was fucking great. Kirsten Dunst is obviously the focus of the film, and she's great. But all of the sisters are amazing in this, in their slight differences, in their similarities as a family unit. But here's something I wanted to talk about, which I appreciate about the film, is that as parents, as strict parents, James Woods and Kathleen Turner, they take a turn later on. They do seem strict, but not insanely so. Not over the top throughout most of the film. Which makes this movie so interesting. It's not it fully is a mystery until towards the end.
I want to make a comparison. So I want to compare this film to the film Carrie.
Yes.
And there's a notable difference. So in both films, you have a highly Christian conservative mother who is in charge of an adolescent female, trying to protect her from sort of the wicked world and sexuality, and sort of the measure of failure is sort of them becoming, is basically them having sex, them becoming involved in sexuality and worldliness. And whereas in Carrie, the father is absent. And we are to believe that Carrie is the product of sort of a unsavory tryst between the mother and the father, who then isn't around. In this film, the father is present, but we see him to be totally ineffectual.
Yeah.
He is completely. He's this laughable stereotype watching the game when the priest comes over to talk to everyone, and he's completely enamored with the game and his beer. But then there's this interesting dynamic where he seems to be the more permissive one as Josh Hartnett, Trip Fontaine, launches his plan to take all the girls to homecoming. And he's the one who seems to be on board, and the mother's the one who needs to be convinced. And I think that's interesting.
But that's very important that the mother is fairly easily convinced. You know what I mean? That it's not this cartoonish thing, whereas Carrie was an allegory. This is almost a kind of emotionally distant and periscoped view of a reality. That's why I think the slices of humor within the film aren't just there to break up the mystery or the bleakness. They're there to in its own artistic way show a reality to the situation, which is the reality of these girls being viewed as objects, to be owned, to be ogled, to be viewed, to be loved, to be...
Ooh. There's the thing. We'll get to it
We'll get to it. But like, for example, the scene in the beginning when the youngest daughter commits suicide, at the very end of the shot, the sprinkler starts going.
Yeah.
It's a very funny touch. It's also a very real touch. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's why I very much appreciate that it's not a cartoonish, overbearing parents. They are overbearing.
Although,
it gets overbearing. Yes,
yeah.
100%. Frank, do you have thoughts on...
Are you done fiddling with your computer?
Not particularly, other than James Woods is really good.
So briefly. So Trip Fontaine is played by two people. The young version is Josh Hartnett, and it's beautiful and perfect. In his full bloom of youth.
Wearing the worst wig I've ever seen.
Yeah. But he's perfect. for the role. And everybody seems to be more or less the age they're meant to be playing.
Yeah.
Which I find fascinating. And when you do that, you often find that not a lot of people go on to have fruitful careers.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, Kirsten Dunst is the only one who went on to have a fruitful career.
And
even
Josh Hartnett.
Josh Hartnett, more or
what's
less.
he done
kind
lately?
of.
He did
Not a
Penny
ton.
Dreadful from a few years ago.
Who remembers that? I don't.
I'd say him and the one sister. I recognize her.
Yeah, I have no idea from what
The
though.
like thin-faced sister.
Yeah, who knows?
I should look.
I was going to say two of the younger kid actors have gone on to some success. One is Hayden Christensen.
And the other is the guy from Rooney, Jason Schwartzman's brother.
Oh, I was going to say the other one is Jonathan Tucker.
Him too.
Who's Hayden Christensen?
He was
Anakin Skywalker.
No. I mean, in the movie.
He's the awkward kid.
Anakin Skywalker.
He's the one. He looks like a baby.
Is he the tiny kid?
No, he's not the tiniest kid, but he does look like a baby. But he looks like a baby Hayden Christensen.
Interesting.
Which is
Because he was like 16 or 17 when they shot this movie.
Interesting.
Anyway, let's
Anyway,
move on.
no. I had a point, which is he's played by two people. Yes, one is Josh Hartnett, but he's also played by the grimy adult. And he goes on. They have this weird sort of interrogation sequence where the boys, I suppose, in a completely off-screen investigation they launch, they find him when he is revealed to be in an institution, a rehab, a mental institute. We don't know. And they're talking to him, and he's recounting the love, and he talks about it as if it's the singular event of infatuation and
I
desire.
walked home alone that night. I didn't care how she got home. It was weird. I mean, I liked her. I liked her a lot. But out there on the field, it was just different then. That was the last time I saw her. You know, most people will never taste that kind of love. But at least I tasted it once, right?
It's time for your 6 o'clock group meeting.
But the moment he it's done, it's over. He literally leaves her in the middle of a fucking field in the open.
Which that scene is my key to the understanding of this film in this viewing, which is I don't believe that the kids went to interview interested parties later on to make this documentary. I believe that is Sofia Coppola. The rest of the film, I can see all of the narration of the older children being directly from the novel. You know, makes total sense. It feels like it. I would be very surprised if that was in the novel, that interviewing of the older Trip Fontaine, because that feels so much like a Sofia Coppola edition, which breaks you out. It's weird. There are two moments that most of the film is just narrated by one of the adult children, except for two moments, which is after the youngest sister commits suicide. They have an assembly, and the voiceover is interrupted by, I'm assuming, one of the people putting on the assembly talking about the color of the folder. Yeah. They picked green because it's a happier color. Obviously, we can't use red, which that feels very odd and out of place until you realize, then later on with Trip Fontaine, this is Sofia Coppola signaling at the bullshit of the older child narrator. It's all bullshit. When the kids say, you know, it didn't matter that there were girls, but we loved them.
So much has been said about the girls over the years, but we have never found an answer. It didn't matter in the end how old they had been, or that they were girls, but only that we had loved them, and that they hadn't heard us calling, still do not hear us calling them out of those rooms where they went to be alone for all time, and where we will never find the pieces to put them.
Having broken curfew, Lux and her sisters are punished by a paranoid Mrs. Lisbon by being taken out of school and confined to the house. The sisters contact the boys across the street by using light signals and sharing songs over the phone. During this time, Lux rebels against her repression and becomes overtly promiscuous. Having anonymous sexual encounters on the roof of her house late at night, the neighbor boys spy from across the street. After weeks of confinement, the sisters leave notes for the boys. The boys call the girls and reach them by phone, and the two groups take turns playing songs over the line. When the boys arrive that night, they find Lux alone in the living room smoking a cigarette. She invites them inside to wait for her sisters while she goes to start the car. Curious, the boys wander into the basement after hearing a noise and discover Bonnie's body hanging from the ceiling rafters. Horrified, they rush back upstairs only to stumble upon the body of Mary in the kitchen. The boys realize that the girls had all killed themselves in an apparent suicide pact. Devastated by the suicides, Mr. and Mrs. Lisbon leave the neighborhood. Mr. Lisbon has a friend clean out the house and sell off the family belongings in a yard sale. Whatever did not sell was put in the trash, including the family photos, which the neighborhood boys collect as mementos. The house is sold to a young couple from the Boston area. The adults in the community go about their lives as if nothing happened. The men acknowledge that they had loved the girls and that they will never know why the sisters took their lives.
So this is kind of the best scene in the movie for me, because it's the only scene that approaches what I feel like this film should be, which is when the littlest one is saying, oh, these girls, I wish I could just feel them up once. And there's a creaking noise, and the toes of a hanging corpse just sort of gently push into the frame and push into his face. Like, that's a moment of sort of shock and mystery and strangeness that this movie sort of could have evoked a little bit more often. I think the better version of this movie was made like 20-something years prior in Australia, and it's a film called Picnic at Hanging Rock. It is a film that is similarly about...
We'll get to it.
We'll get to it. We're going to watch it someday.
It's on my list.
It is a film that is about virginal young girls who, on an excursion into the outback of Australia, one day disappear. And the mystery of the film is, where did they go? What happened to them? Were they just swallowed up by the outback? Much better movie, much creepier movie, much eerier movie, and had, I think, a little bit more to say about sort of the mysteries of the way teenage girls are treated in society, particularly Western societies.
Crikey. Did they hire Crocodile Dundee?
Yes, they did.
Them on the walkabout.
Christ.
For context, Tom giggled to himself for a second, and I was like, he's going to do the Crocodile Dundee thing.
I can't help myself.
Now, Frank, you can't bring up a movie that none of us have saw, because we can't refute you. You fucking piece of shit. I can't fully put my finger on what this film is about. It reminds me of Me and Earl and the Dying Girl, which is a film... Jesus Christ.
It is shitty and bad.
No, it's a good film and you're a dumb bitch. It's a movie that is about a very specific point of view that you don't get to see. Oh my God, I quit this podcast.
I'm sorry, I couldn't. Frank was... That was hilarious, and Frank was laughing off mic.
Jesus.
And it was cracking me up.
All right, I made my point. You guys talk about this movie.
I think we're done.
No!
Good movie, Sofia Coppola.
Jesus
okay.
Christ.
Okay, no. All right, so... fucking Christ. Anyway, this movie is not... subreddit, I'm 14 and this is deep. However, when I think of Sofia Coppola, and I think of this movie, and I think of not Train Spotting. Jesus, Lost in Translation. She's Danny Boyle. Who knew? I don't think I'm 14. This is deep. I think I'm 19, and this is deep. which, just like The Age of 19, is over the end zone line of adulthood. So there is some profundity here, but I think there's a little bit of I don't even know what to call it, but just sort of the enthusiasm for profundity in youth.
Here's what I appreciate about Sofia Coppola. One, I think she's a better filmmaker than her father. I think she's a better and more consistent filmmaker than her father. Her father has made a few better films, but I think she is more consistent and interesting than her father is.
Didn't she like direct a video for like Cut Your Hair or something like that?
She did. This Here Giraffe.
This Here Giraffe by Flaming Lips.
Friend of the podcast.
Oh.
We did the album.
I love that music video. It's one of my favorite things.
What she is not, in both of those examples of Lost in Translation and this, she is comfortable with not answering questions. She lays things out. She does not answer them because the answer doesn't matter. This film is about, in a sense, about these boys' obsession with these sisters who have committed suicide, right? And they're left wondering why they commit suicide. And they don't know the answer. And they think they know the question to the answer, which is, they loved them, and thus they become obsessed.
I'm glad that I never watched it as an adolescent and thus developed any sort of sentimental attachment to it, because I think it kind of has a sugary sweet sort of like smack, like Salinger-esque.
Yeah.
I don't know what to call what I'm saying, but yeah, like I'm 19 and this is deep, kind of yeah, you're right. This is a little interesting and deep, but words fail or I fail. Okay, so 10 out of 10 would recommend.
Film Dogtooth, which I think is more along the lines of what you wanted this movie to be, Frank, but that's not what the movie is, and not what the movie ever intended to be. Apocalypse Now sucks.
Dogtooth better movie, by the way.
Different
movie.
This is a complete.
I like this movie a lot. Actually, I'm just being a ding dong.
This is a very complex and subtle film about not what it's presenting to you. Eat shit, everyone.
A cripple walks amongst you, all you tired human beings. He's got all the things a cripple has, not two working arms and legs. And vital parts fall from his system and dissolve in Scottish rain. Vitally, he doesn't miss him, he's too fucked up to care. Was that you in front of me? Coming back for even more, exactly the same. You must be a masochist.
Now, what we actually did on the pod this week is Midnight Organ Fight by the band Frightened Rabbit, the second studio album by the Scottish indie rock band, recorded in 2007, split transatlantically between recording in Bridgeport, Connecticut and Glasgow, Scotland. And it's 48 minutes long, and it was produced by Peter Caddis. And it had 3 singles: Heads Roll Off, Fast Blood, and I Feel Better / The Twist. Take it away!
Now, Frank, you start us out.
This is a great album that I came to around college. It's a really sort of emotionally raw and sad album, and it's made doubly sad by the fact that the lead singer Scott Hutchinson threw himself off of a bridge in Glasgow last year in 2018 and committed suicide, which is something that's covered a lot on this album and the other Frightened Rabbit albums.
And this episode, apparently.
Yeah, and this episode, apparently. But it's just sort of like emotionally raw, jangly guitar indie rock that, if I'm feeling some kind of particular mood, still kind of gets me back in that college mindset. I don't think I will ever, because everybody moves on from something. And I don't think I will ever fully connect with this, with the time and the place that this album was ever again. But when I do listen to it, it does bring me back to that time and place in ways that I find very galvanizing and cool.
So I want to say, my heart goes out to everybody involved in the band for Scott Hutchinson's suicide, and everybody who was a fan of the music and that it connects to. And we all connect to different music. It means different things to us. That being said, I fucking hated this album, and I was cringing the entire time. This is my least favorite kind of music, and I think it is possibly, I'm working on the theory that it is harmful.
I am going to kill you,
Tom,
with a stone.
Now, Justin prepped me on this earlier, and I think he was going to do something more amicable, but I think that went out the window as we taped this episode.
Okay. Oh, there are so many. Going back to a previous episode when we did Neutral Milk Hotels in the aeroplane over the sea, and I presciently said that fuck all of the music that try to do this.
This doesn't try to do that.
Oh my god, it so fucking does.
Doesn't.
In the most basic fucking ways. In the
mommy and daddy style.
In the ways of using
in the ways that Sofia Coppola made a film that was sort of not like her better filmmakers that came before her, and tried to make the sort of baby steps version of that.
Like her father, who did Dracula with Keanu Reeves and One from the Fucking Heart. Oh, and what's that Robin Williams movie where he grows up really fast? like those filmic ancestors. Frank? Huh?
Not him.
Like that? Frank? Huh?
Well,
is that what you mean?
Thanks for tuning into the last episode of
Anyway, this album's great. Fuck Justin.
No. I think what I despise about it is it's this whole genre of music that and the style of singing that
he's fucking Scottish.
No, it's not the Scottish thing, because he's doing a Scottish version of this thing, which is it sounds like a guy. I was telling Tom, I call it the 127 hours guy, which it sounds like a guy who fell in a canyon and is crawling back to society and whelping for some help. No,
you're saying this about a dead man.
No. That's why I had to preface it, because it's very sad about that, but there are so many musicians who do the same exact thing who have not committed suicide. And back to the Neutral Milk Hotel thing, using violent imagery for sexual lyricism, but in this it's so less poetic. The difference between this and that is it's so fucking internal.
Is it raw in a way that makes you uncomfortable?
It's raw in a way that makes me fucking cringe.
Is it raw in a way that makes you uncomfortable and you don't like confronting that about somebody being sort of personal about themselves and not dressing it up in sort of weird archness like in Neutral Milk Hotel?
No. It's when an entire genre of music creates music that I don't see how you can listen to any of these songs truthfully and not weep. I do not see how you can perform any of these songs truthfully and not weep. And thus it is so it is so performative. Now there are so go on.
I don't think it can be performative if it's honest.
Oh, it 100% can be. When you make an entire career out of raw, emotional, honest breakup songs, if that is your bag,
That's not the whole band, though. That's not the whole discography.
It's a whole fucking genre, my friend. It's a whole fucking... Tom, back me up.
All right, okay. I gotta say,
I was prepared to play nice, but you threw down the gauntlet, my friend.
I gotta say, this kind of music is not my bag. I was really searching for that Simpsons clip, so I wasn't listening so much to what Justin was saying. But okay, so
they're hard to find on YouTube.
I remember him saying so. Okay, so I disagree with sort of the larger societal implications of the existence of music like this, but I also I kind of. I'm going to deflect by saying this. So there's an interesting Venn diagram that exists for Tom. And the Venn diagram has people who like Neutral Milk Hotel, people who like this record, and people who don't like either. And Justin is in the likes Neutral Milk Hotel but doesn't like this. Frank's in the likes both. And I'm in the likes neither. That's all.
The Neutral Milk Hotel album was about something. It's about something that Jeff Mangum was fascinated by, was interested in. It is a very cerebral album while also full of raw emotion. This album is full of raw emotion about a heavy breakup.
Which is why people like it and relate to it.
Which is why people like it and relate to it. Yes. However. I think this is this kind of song. I can get on board a little bit with listening to it as the singer. I've had those emotions before. I think we all have. Very intense, very dramatic, very over the top emotions. There's some humor on the album. There's a line that I actually very much liked of something like, "I don't want you back, but like the guy you're with, I hope he fucking died."
Yeah.
That I found that kind of funny. And to give this album some credit, musically there's a lot of catchy songs. I still hate the way he sings. However, it's that continuation and molding of like emo and screamo with the folk trappings.
Screamo?
Oh yeah. But
have you heard screamo?
At least screamo had some fun screaming, as opposed to a whelping.
Also, have you heard emo?
But put yourself in the shoes of somebody who this song was written about. It's all these songs about how I will fucking destroy myself because we broke up. It's so fucking heavy. It's so and if this was the only album, I don't want to lay the blame at the feet of Frightened Rabbit, because as I said, I like this a lot better than a lot of the other music in the genre. But I hate the genre. I hate it. I hate it so much.
How do you feel about Elliott Smith, by the way?
I love Elliott Smith because that's the thing. It's not a genre of depression or sadness. It's a genre of depression, sadness, and romantic relationships, which coalesce into this toxic fucking thing that it's such a. I don't want to. I'm not going to tie this in with like a nice guy type thing, but. It's a different kind of guy. It's the sensitive bro.
So, I'm in a weird spot here. I'm in a weird spot here because the game plan, and I'm sorry, Frank. I'm a little sorry, and I have a bit more of a relativist view of things. But I
was coming into this worried that Tom was going to tear it apart.
I mean. Okay, so the cat's out of the bag. I'm not a fan. I'm not sure if I'm on board with the verbosity of Justin's critique. And like I said, I'm a bit more relativistic about it. I definitely recognize that in a lot of my peers, Plaid Lab peers, and one thing, like I caught a music video from this record, and they looked like me. You know what I mean? They even as musicians, they had similar tasting gear, but sort of like they were doing something, following an impulse that I would never have as a musician, and that I don't have when I'm a consumer of music. But yet, it's one that I recognize in so many of my peers as a musician and as a Plaid Lad. Obviously, Frank for liking this, and this record seems well loved, and so many. And I don't. There's an effusiveness to it, emotionally, and a rawness, a directness, like plugging your iPhone charger, like cutting the cord of your iPhone charger, splicing the cables and plugging them into an outlet. no charging brick type. And maybe you are right. Maybe it is like a detachment thing, but I prefer when emotions are sort of channeled through a.
Art. Metaphor.
By which you mean sort of bullshit performative construction meant to hide people's emotions.
I've been drinking a lot of tea recently.
And beer more recently.
more beer than tea.
I've been drinking a lot of tea, and I like a sweet cup of tea, so I'll put a teaspoon of sugar in. And now one day I forgot that I had put the sugar in, so I put another teaspoon in, and when I tasted it, it had way too much sugar. And it tasted disgusting. Now we think sugar is a sweet thing. It's a nice thing to consume, but when you have too much of it, it becomes disgusting and repulsive to Justin. Go on, Frank, or Tom.
I don't know what was the sugar in that metaphor, but we're getting below 10% here, so we might need to.
Yeah, I don't know what meter are you referring to, the battery or your patience?
Frank, I love you. I didn't think we would get to this point until we talked about the Pixies.
Oh, when we talk about the Pixies, the shoe's on the other foot.
I haven't been picking music things because I've been a little afraid of this of being the Frank in that scenario, of having picked something. But now I feel like I have to kind of like I kind of have to like put a sacred cow of mine on the chopping block and kind of eat shit. So I'm gonna have to like contribute more suggestions because it doesn't feel fair that something obviously that Frank really loves.
This was not my suggestion. This was yours, Justin.
No, it wasn't. I've never heard of this in my life. It was yours.
Was it mine?
Yeah.
Really?
100%.
What a delightful mystery if this was just a random record.
This was an anti-parent trap.
Yeah.
Fuck this album. The Proclaimers are better.
No, they're not.
Yes, they are. Oh! 500 miles and wood.
What was the other song?
Over and done with it. It's over and done with. It's over and done with it. Over and done with. Dr. Frasier Crane is, it's not really about him, it's a Niles one. Dr. Niles Frasier Crane is having trouble in his marriage. Also, Daphne is dating a ginger Viking man, but things get
terrible
heated.
Reminds me of Justin.
No.
Justin is also a terrible actor.
Things get heated when Daphne and Niles are brought together for a night of possible consummation of their love. But also, I think not really. I think this is possibly the end of the gross Niles. I think maybe he might calm down. Dr. Frasier Crane, number 16 or something or other. What happened one night or the winter? Winter comes, but once a year. Love you all. See you all. Bye-bye.
So this is not quite the end of Gross Niles. There's still a little bit afterwards.
Is there?
I think
I kind of agree with the impulse. So I think this is, if it's not the end of Gross Niles, it's definitely the show engaging with Gross Niles.
It kind of, after the fact, has created a narrative for Niles and Maris's marriage that it's been rocky, and that's why he's been such a creep.
Yeah.
But yeah, it doesn't really fully end.
Yeah,
or change.
And I think it kind of, for the first time, by putting them alone, I think this is the first time they've been alone besides the dress modeling conference. And I think we see some real depth of conversation with them, and we see some real interaction with them outside of just sort of sexual infatuation. And I think this is laying the groundwork of taking it from a cheap bit to something that can be less morally questionable.
Yeah.
An actual love. Which reminds me of a few episodes back when they're in the bar and Niles is describing Daphne to the bartender. He kind of like gushes and he says like, she's got eyes that stare directly into your soul with neither artifice or evasion. And I thought that was just such a beautiful, I memorized it. We don't even need to find the clip. So it's the beginning of them reckoning with it. And it's a pretty funny episode.
I think it's very funny.
It is funny. The visual gag of Niles revealing the clothing that was going to be his sexual role-playing clothing as a sort of floofy pirate outfit. And then Martin walking in just as he does that is a wonderful visual joke.
Yeah.
And then
Another...
the line, does it count as an eye patch if I wear it on my...
Yeah!
Stop!
Yeah,
Another great physical thing, though. I don't know if it's physical as much as musical. Later on, when
yes,
when Niles is playing the piano, it's very dramatic. It's very wonderful.
And then she walks in.
Oh, Dr. Crane, you play beautifully.
Thank you.
So fucking good. The crying bit where he goes on this long thing, which I agree with. I personally, I don't cry very often. Justin cries all the time. He has an entire Instagram about how he cries.
Check it out.
And I don't.
It's mostly Star Trek at the moment.
I don't cry too much. And he's like, "Oh, it's times like this I wish I could cry," and it's not the kind of person I am. But then Eric, the Red. Brings Daphne back from their dates and gives her a smooch, and then he's sleeping on the couch and he starts openly weeping. Oh, he can't even cry, but his unrequited crush and making out with a ponytail guy, that gets him. That gets him good.
Yeah. Can we talk about? I touched on this briefly, but this ponytail actor.
I love him. I love how bad he is. I love him.
He's a fun level of. I think it's especially 90s bad acting.
Yeah, it looks like he read the lines for the first time when they said rolling.
Yeah. He seems like he's probably a local theater actor who is also bad at that.
Yeah, I'm sure he's a nice guy.
Yeah, if you're out there,
this character reminds me of Justin. He does. I don't even really know why. He's just kind of beefy and like has his rock band in a ponytail. Justin used to have a ponytail. I don't know. It's just in my mind. It's this weird connection I can't shake.
I like him.
He never takes Frasier's coffee.
Yeah, he never takes his order. Fuck that shit. He's too busy flirting with Daphne.
That flirting was
very odd and aggressive.
Very. But
admirable.
But coming from both ends, so it's like it's not weird in that sense, but it's like how did they have this on TV?
Yeah, how did they come up with that many food metaphors, like coffee metaphors, and also put
had a great zinger.
I think he says, "Do you like cum in your coffee?"
2 pounds of the Kenya blend. You remembered.
Hard to forget.
Excuse me, you haven't taken my order yet.
Most people find that blend too intense.
Not me. I like something that holds its body on me tongue.
Excuse me, we seem to have spilled something here. If you could just...
I don't suppose you'd be interested in something robust, if it didn't come on too strong.
Oh, if it was a little bit sweet, I might take a liking to it.
Would you like to step over to the counter and try my special blend?
I'd love to.
Oh, nothing for me, thanks.
Yeah.
And Niles very hilariously spills his coffee at the moment.
Which I would too, because that's gross.
Yeah.
There was a great zinger. He's a musician in the grunge rock movement of the 90s happening in Seattle. Good on you, Frasier, for catching on to that.
Justin, was this the grunge?
No, it's not the grunge kid. The grunge kid works for Elliott Bay Towers and helps them move some stuff. He's got like a leather jacket and ripped jeans.
His name is Leroy. He has a surfboard.
No, that's much later.
He's Poochie from The Simpsons.
No, Poochie comes much later.
So Poochie is Cam Jansen. What? Cam Jansen. That's a child character. Anyway.
Anyway, Frasier Crane.
Anyway, some great zingers. I've been trying to say this for a while. Eric the Red breaks up with Daphne, and she says, "Oh, he said he needed to focus on his music. Oh, I knew he was lying. I've heard his music." That's going to be a clip, so don't worry about it.
It's very good Australian.
It's a good line.
Noi.
Funny episode.
It's a funny episode. I like they're talking about his glockenspiel's working.
That's a good one.
After she says it towards the end, there's a very long pause. Like so long that you think, oh, that's the joke. That's fully the joke. And then Niall says, oh, the clock.
Yeah,
which is such amazing, smart comic timing.
Also, we see a moment where Niles gets a hold of himself.
Yes.
And I appreciate that it's showing some where Niles is getting some character growth and some depth. Because Niles is probably my favorite character on the show.
Yeah.
And
probably the best character.
Yeah.
And he definitely changed the most. And just that moment of realization where he catches himself when the glockenspiel starts working spontaneously and sort of the infatuation energy is sapped, and you realize that, yes, he does indeed love Maris. Now, within the reality of the show, assuming that the writers weren't changing things as they went, she was a bit of a terror. But even in a relationship that doesn't work out, even in a relationship where he's not treated right, he truly loves her.
Yeah.
And he lets himself love her. And I think that's a wonderful quality in somebody.
Yeah.
That they'll let themselves, even if it's not the right thing. That's great.
Coming up on recommendations, going to tell you what to check out. Everybody, felicitations, recommendations, listen to us.
I would like to recommend, very weirdly, some of my Christmas music was featured on a New Zealand Christmas music podcast that you can check out right now, hosted by a very nice bloke named Dwayne. It's called.
Was this a relationship that you had cultivated, or did they just find you?
No, it was just a random connection on Reddit. But it's out there now. You can listen. It's a fun podcast. It's got a Plaid Lads connection because this episode he is talking about music from the Christmas Chronicles movie.
Oh no!
So you can check.
Was
that
there
out.
music in that movie? I don't remember.
The best music when he
the blues
racistly
thing.
turns a jail cell into a R&B
He forces
band.
the black guy to play what was it, a trumpet?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that now.
But you can check that out on all of the podcast things. Tinsel Tunes Podcast. Tinsel Tunes Podcast. Tell Dwayne that Justin sent you.
Oi, crikey! Or whatever they say in New Zealand.
They say, osh, nosh. It's Lord of the Rings.
Frank?
I'm going to recommend The Winner of Mixed Drinks by Frightened Rabbit. Haha, fuck you.
Eat my...
Justin, you called me a funge 2 times the last episode. I don't know what a funge is, but I'm going to be one. And also recommend Picnic at Hanging Rock by Peter Weir. It's like the Virgin Suicides, but good.
I recommend that Frank goes and fucks himself. Go watch Dogtooth. It's a similar movie, equally
Great
good. Go read some Shirley Jackson novels. Go read We Have Always Lived in the Castle.
In the Castle.
It's
Great book.
a similar-ish feel. Yeah. Go watch A Christmas Story and The Wonder Years.
And How I Met Your Mother.
How I Met Your Mother, yeah.
The Goldbergs.
The Goldbergs, yep. Go watch what's that one?
What else has narration?
Speechless. I've watched Speechless a couple times. It's cute. Tom? It has nothing to do with anything. It's got Minnie Driver in it.
Delightful actress.
Yeah.
I gotta go see about a girl. That girl being Minnie Driver that Matt Damon's gonna go see about at the end of Good Will Hunting.
It's a fun movie. It's got Elliott Smith soundtrack. Much better than Frightened Rabbit.
Go fuck yourself. Tom?
I'm reeling right now. I'll put it in post.
What the fuck are we doing next week?
I don't know. We're either doing a Carpenter special with our special guest Steven Suboleski, a friend of ours.
I see.
Or something else.
Okay. Because Superstar is very easy to find.
Yeah. So I think we're either doing Superstar and the album Carpenters by the Carpenters, or I guess we can do Pather Panchali.
Oh, yeah.
And music, which I'm forcing Tom to pick.
Yeah.
It could be a new thing that none of us know.
Pather Panchali is going to be a good one because there might not be in India by the time that we do it.
Oh God, I don't want to. It's like seeing somebody's suggestion be eviscerated like this should make me not want to make a suggestion.
I wasn't going to, but you guys were being sons of bitches.
I mean, I don't need.
I was going to put out a goddamn olive branch. But you done pissed me off. Ooh, yeah.
You went from Stone Cold to Macho Man there.
Okay. Goodbye.
That was a fun episode.
That was a fun episode.
I think that was a very great episode.
That might be the episode that's too angry to be released.
Glad Lads is available on Apple Podcasts and the Google Play Store. At GladLadsPod on Instagram and Twitter. Email us at gladladspod@gmail.com. Justin's band is at Welcome to Wonderballs on Instagram and welcometowonderballs.bandcamp.com. Also, at Somethings That Made Me Cry on Instagram. Tom's band is Elbow8, elbow8.bandcamp.com and at Elbow8band on Instagram. Music by Tom Donahue, who also engineers, mixes and edits the show. Please leave us a rating anywhere you can on the internet or maybe a public bathroom stall. Goodbye.